Just outside the quaint town of Puente Viejo, Spain, is a cave system known as Monte Castillo. And within this system, a specific cave called El Castillo contains some of the oldest human cave paintings dating back to 41,000 years ago. For centuries, the focus of paleoanthropology has been the representational art that our ancestors left behind in caves. Eye-catching drawings of deer, horse, bison, and human figures. But in 2012, Genevieve von Petzinger, paleoanthropologist and researcher for the University of Victoria, discovered something overlooked by many experts. She analyzed ancient art from over 370 ancient caves all over the world and discovered that since antiquity, humans have been using the same 32 symbols, geometric signs that form some kind of alphabet. Von Petzinger suggests that the 32 signs do seem to have communicative properties, and we can possibly trace the origins of our first writing system back to these ancient symbols. How do the symbols that we see today in our religions, our flags, and our institutions connect us to an ancient past that we have barely scratched the surface of understanding? And when this is revealed, what will it say about humanity and its future?
The use of symbols to communicate ideas goes back into our history long before language was even created. When we talk about the study of symbols today, there are different kinds of symbols that we become accustomed to, sometimes without even thinking about it. There is a form of language that has no words and no sound, and I'm fascinated by this form because it may represent one of the most advanced and sophisticated forms of communication. It's called an ideogram. And an ideogram does precisely what it suggests. It is a symbol that represents an entire idea or an entire concept without ever uttering a word or a phrase or a sound to describe that idea, and without needing a complex language of alphabet to describe the nuances of that idea.
If these symbols are more complex than our current written language, does the infamous number 32 have any correlation to the ancient past?
The significance of the number 32 in the Western occult tradition is highly significant, and it has to do with the so-called Tree of Life on the Kabbalah. So on the Tree of Life on the Kabbalah, there are 10 what are called sephira, or spheres. Each one of these spheres is supposed to depict a different aspect of being. They also seem to depict other dimensions. And there are 22 paths that lead from Sephira to Sephira. Now, those 22 paths match the 22 trumps in the tarot deck, which I don't have to tell people is extremely mysterious. Nobody knows really where the tarot deck came from. It just appears with all of this knowledge. Now, each one of the 22 trumps in the tarot is equated to one of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And since the Hebrew alphabet letters are equated to a numerical value, you have a perfect system of basically what you're seeing. So these 22 paths, represented by numbers, are the frequencies that separate these different dimensions one from the other. And you're looking at a map, an ancient map, left to humanity about that knowledge.
Could this ancient map of 32 correlate with the 32 ancient symbols used around the world almost 40,000 years ago? Where could this map be leading us? One thing is for sure, that some of these ancient symbols seem to be burned into our subconscious.
So we have to ask, how is it possible that these symbols stay around for thousands upon thousands of years? Why does culture after culture adopt these symbols? There must be an inherent meaning. One explanation is the study of phosphenes. When NASA astronauts first went into outer space, they would look towards the center of the galaxy and cosmic rays would ping off the retina of their eye, and they started seeing various symbols. Crosses, hash marks, spirals, and it led to NASA having to redesign the astronauts' helmets so that it would deflect the cosmic rays. And this led to a theory that perhaps some of these symbols are hardwired into our DNA.
Whether this be the cross on a Christian church or the crescent upon an Islamic mosque, all of these symbols are there to instill a certain emotional reaction, one that will trigger deep within us a connection with the sacred, with the divine, with the otherworldly. And these symbols have been used for tens of thousands of years, and of course, we still see them as important today.
If we take these ancient 32 symbols and we look through antiquity, we can see how they have been formed into much more concrete images. But these concrete images began to hold a certain frequency and meaning throughout time, meanings we still hold today. Experts suggest there are 7 main ones: the Vesica Piscis, the Star of David, the Ankh, the Cross, the Chicana, the Swastika, and the Crescent Moon. If we go back into antiquity, how has the meaning of these symbols changed? And most importantly, how do all of these symbols bring us back to an ancient civilization known as Atlantis? We first start with the star and crescent. It is an iconographic symbol used in various historical contexts, but is best known today as a symbol of the Ottoman Empire, Turkey, and Pakistan. It is also often considered as a symbol of Islam by extension. Andrew Collins and Freddie Silva suggest this ancient symbol was possibly connected with the cycle of the moon and its feminine origin.
The crescent symbol is not simply a sign of the moon, but it is the symbol of the cycle of life itself that was defined from very earliest times by the periodicity of the moon, the different phases that it would take, and its effect not only upon the tides and water, but also upon the human bodily cycle, particularly that within the female cycle.
One of the earliest recorded uses of the crescent symbol was the goddess Sin in Babylon, and before that in Sumeria. Now, there's an interesting overlap here because her original name was Sin, which means that by the time you get to the historical era in Christianity and you have sinners, it meant that the church, who understood these concepts and they wanted to take the women and the divine bloodline out of the whole equation, they began to associate sin with the lunar concept by making the number 13 unlucky. It's elemental because there are 13 lunations in every solar year. So 12 months of the solar year, there are 13 lunar cycles. So the number 13 is always synonymous with the movement of the moon. Sin, who is the lunar goddess of the Babylonians, is a sinner.
In Latin, the Vesica Piscis simply means bladder of the fish. You can find this symbol in paintings of Christ and the Buddha, and it can also be found in sacred geometry and Roman depictions. Freddie suggests that the symbol has been known through antiquity as a symbol of all-knowing and the creative force behind it.
If you take it at its basic level, the understanding that the universe starts with the creative force, which is symbolized by the circle. And that circle is all-knowing, it's all representative, okay? Everything exists in that circle, and paradoxically, it doesn't exist outside it. Well, how does the energy in that circle know what's outside it? Well, it begins to separate. And once it separates, it goes from its divine nature into its divine opposites. So there's a tension of opposites that takes place because both circumferences are placed on the center of each circle. It was made very popular by the Greeks, and certainly made very popular during the Christian era, because if you take the center of the Vesica Piscis with the two arms extended, you create the sign of the fish, which brings us back again to the esoteric tradition of Jesus and the tradition that he was following, which is to do with early Gnostic Christianity, which is an offshoot of Egyptian principles and other principles that came back from the time of the gods.
The Star of David, a hexagram shape, is mostly associated with the Jewish community and to the first King David. The earliest depictions were used in medieval Arabic literature by Kabbalists as talismanic protective amulets, where it was known as the Seal of Solomon among Muslims. Sonia Grace suggests this star goes far beyond the representation of King David, and it represents the idea of freedom within the universe.
The Star of David has much older origins, dating back to the beginning of this phase of humanity in Egypt, 10,000 BC. It was created in likeness of the pyramids, but also represents what so much of Egyptian mythology talks about, which is duality. The Star of David was adapted by Moses and Abraham because they understood what the pyramids were actually used for.